Welcome into the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeart Radio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us today. As always, a show full of things for you today. We can talk about just the stuff from that update that we just got from Fox Sports there, where Sean Payton is leaving the New Orleans Saints. I think he was kind of underrated. Not really underrated, but when you look at Sean Payton, man, what a great coach he was. We can definitely talk about that. We can also get into there was one thing at the end of that update that kind of hit me in the face there a little bit. Maybe it's just me being a guy who has been an official I used to do softball and baseball and all kind of stuff. They announced who the referee for the Super Bowl is going to be. Who the hell cares? I mean, if you're a ref, your job is to do the job and no one knows that you're there. That's kind of the way it is. So, yeah, I'm stunned by that. Hey, let's announce who the Super Bowl referee is. Maybe we're going down the wrong path with all that. I don't know. Anyway, we can definitely talk about that because now that's the other thing, too. People are upset with the playoff and the way that the Bills-Chiefs game went where, well, they had the coin flipping over. No one cares about that either, in theory. Unless you're a Bills fan, I understand you're angry. But hey, guess what? If your defense didn't give up all those points, you wouldn't have this problem. Stop it. What a mess, man. Anyway, today we're going to talk about some recruiting. And I got to bring up the Clemson recruiting and some interesting things there. We're going to look at some college football teams that could make the jump this season. We'll get into that. And, of course, the phone lines are open for you at 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832. Blake already chiming in, says, I like it. Refs need more accountability. I'd like to see pool questions to the SEC refs like the NFL does post-game. Yeah, and okay, I can get that. But in the end, do you really want, holding them accountable and knowing who they are two different things. The conference or the league should hold them accountable. If you make a bad call in a game, then you should be held accountable and you shouldn't get more playoff games later on. You should be put back on some of the games that you get, maybe extra training. But announcing who the Super Bowl referee is, I don't know. I don't know about all that. All right, we'll talk about college football teams that could make jumps this season. I want to talk about recruiting for just a moment. See, this is the segment where I'm going to end up basically, what's the term my grandmama used to use? Talking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm going to start with this. I looked at some of the players that are in the playoffs right now that are on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl. And we live by recruiting rankings. Man, I've got the number one recruited class. And Texas A&M fans, they'll tell you, we got the number one recruited class. We went 8-4 last season, but we got the number one recruiting class in the country. And that's good. I kind of get that. But when I look at some of these players that I pulled I started with the quarterbacks from the teams that are left. And you look at how they can be evaluated, what their evaluation was, and how some of them, in fact, two of them actually had to have a start in another spot. Let's start with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was a 4-star recruit in the 247 Sports Composite. In fact, in one set of rankings, he was a 3-star recruit. He went to Ohio State. Things didn't work out well for him there. He had to go and transfer out to another program. I'm not mocking Joe Burrow. I'm just saying sometimes people miss on these things. They really, really do. Patrick Mahomes went to Texas Tech. Man, that's kind of when you think about it, do you think national power when you think Texas Tech? Not really. He was a 3-star recruit there. As we look at the rest of the quarterbacks, Matt Stafford is the only 5-star of the group. Of course, went to Georgia. You can make an argument that they didn't quite get I don't know what the deal was with Georgia when he was there, but Obviously, he didn't do what young Stetson Bennett, what the fourth did, but he was a 5-star quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, bear in mind, Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy that he has been terrible in the playoffs, but he's on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 seasons. He's got his team right there in the mix. This guy's a 2-star player coming out of high school. Then it gets better. Someone that says that Aaron Donald is one of the best players in football, I cannot really argue with you. On the defensive line, he's pretty much unstoppable. Young man went to Pitt, but he was a 3-star player there. And then we go with Cooper Kupp. Yeah, you've seen Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is an all-pro receiver this season. Was well thought of last season. 0 stars. Eastern Michigan. That's where this young man had to play. So I'd say that in that when I look at a lot of these recruiting classes, a lot of it comes down to development. And can you get a coach in there that can do the 2 things? One is convince the kids to come there. That's very important. You got to be able to do that, and you're almost like a salesman. Hey, these are the great things that are about our program. You should come and be a part of it. Spend whatever it is that you want to get them there. But then you've got to do the other thing, especially if you're not, let's say, a top 5 program. Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, Clemson. I say top 5 is in recruiting. Clemson's not there anymore, but they've been one of the top programs here lately. But if you're a team like South Carolina, you got to be able to get these 3-star players, these 4-star players, identify them early and get them to come to your program. And then you got to have the guys that were able to convince them, but now they're going to develop them into being good players. So when I look at assistant coaches, and it is a interesting set when you do that. When I look at assistant coaches, man, the head coaches, it's all built on them. That's just kind of the way it goes. If you don't have, you could be a great head coach, but if you don't have good assistants, your program could be terrible. I mean, it really could be. You could be a guy that's great on the X's and O's front. You could be a decent recruiter yourself, but if you don't have other coaches that can go out from underneath you, man, you are looking out on from the outside looking in, and it's a mess. Anyway, we'll take your comments on that, but I've got to mention the Clemson recruiting class. They picked up a commitment from a safety yesterday, and I used the 3-star term because that's what he's listed as in the 247 Sports Composite. He may end up being the best defensive back ever. I don't know. But Clemson recruiting is now 2nd in the ACC. Now, I know the SEC apologists, folks, they're going to be like, man, Rob, look at that. Clemson can't even out-recruit the ACC, and the ACC is a joke of a football conference. Okay, we can have that. That's fine. But they're behind North Carolina. Not some young coach. I can use Eli Drinkowitz as a guy that's on fire on the recruiting trail. Shane Beamer, a guy who's convincing people that were on the Heisman Trophy watch list at the beginning of the season to come to South Carolina. No. They're losing to Mac Brown, a guy who avoided the mayonnaise bath in December and got, let Shane Beamer have it, basically, as North Carolina was dominated in that game. But according to the latest rankings, he has a better recruiting class than what Dabo Swinney, who has more national titles than he does, by the way, does at Clemson. So I ask, first of all, I don't know how long Mac Brown's going to continue to coach, and we can get into that, but consistency is key here. North Carolina's been recruiting at a much higher level since he got there. The question for you at 803-978-1832, is this the sign where you start tipping your hand just a little bit? What I mean by that is that Clemson's been really good with a lot of the players that they've gotten, But now I think they're 13th, whereas in the latest rankings, and they may improve a little bit, but North Carolina is ahead of them like at 9. And there are other teams in the ACC that are making strides. Miami is moving up the list a good bit. Florida State, if they could have convinced the young man not to go to Jackson State, they'd have a top 10 class. Is the Clemson recruiting gravy train over? Are we at a point now where Clemson's just had better athletes than everyone else in the ACC? Now it's at a point where, man, they better hope the 15 they've got really, really shake out. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. Blake says Pitt is now the king of the ACC until somebody takes them down. Hey, Pitt won the championship this year. 803-978-1832. You don't mock hardware, not on this program. If you win the title, that's awesome. Blake also says maybe that's not as bad with the new TV contract approaching. Look, I think there's a segment of athletic directors that are only going to spend so much. They're only going to spend so much. If you look at, we use Clemson as an example, they didn't have an indoor facility when Dabo Swinney took over. And he worked to get that. And that's a big deal. When you can look your recruits in the face and be like, look, we've got this, and they go somewhere else and they don't have it, they definitely pay attention to that. But I wonder, with Mac Brown and the other folks that are right there on their heels, if Clemson is losing their spot in the recruiting trail. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. And I know you're going to tell me, Rob, you were just telling us that stars don't matter. Yeah, in some instances they don't. But if you look at the top teams that were in the college football playoff this year, with the exception of Cincinnati, they had a lot of 5-star guys, a lot of 4-star guys. Blind Squirrel Online says Dabo needs to embrace the portal. Yeah, well, here's the thing with that. The portal is a good thing, but if you look at the portal in the areas that you could really use some help, which is the defensive line and the offensive line, there aren't a lot of really game-changing folks there. Go and look at it. It's the 247 site has it up there. You can check it out. In the end, it comes back down to being able to control the offensive and defensive lines, in my opinion. Having that great quarterback is awesome. But if you're not able to protect him, you're going to have some issues. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Of course, around the world on the iHeart Radio app. We're taking your calls today. On recruiting, is Clemson missing out? Or is this just a blip? Meaning, yeah, they've have to recenter themselves and they've lost some coaches. And then they're just going to pick right back up and go from there. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to dial if you want to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon. Gene Chizik, according to Jimmy, isn't making the coaching staff any younger. Look, I am amazed by what North Carolina is doing up there with that program. I mean, absolutely amazed. Mac Brown is in definitely the twilight of his career, and he's managed to pull a recruiting class that is as good as this one is. And there were guys in this recruiting class, Shaw, the defensive lineman, that had Clemson in the final mix. So, yeah, you got to look at it from that perspective, too. As I'm pulling up the team rankings right now, the 2022 rankings, you've got North Carolina at number 9 with 2 5-star players. Clemson's at 13. They're behind Mizzou now. Mizzou has moved up to number 12 in the latest rankings, and Mizzou is behind Kentucky. I don't even know where to You've got two SEC East teams right there that are setting the world on fire. That generally, we were looking at the rankings. What was it? The look ahead. They had Kentucky finishing 8-4 next season, Mizzou finishing 4-8. But the other part of it that's interesting too is if you look ahead, Notre Dame's at 7. You've got your 3 SEC teams up there at the top. And then those 2 SEC East teams that haven't had the best of traditions, but man, their coaches are starting to get it right. Kentucky at number 11. Wow. Interesting. Tennessee's at 16. Auburn's at 17. Arkansas's at 20. LSU's at 21. Ole Miss is at 23. South Carolina's at 24. Mississippi State's at 25. And Florida's at 26. And then we can go down from there. It's weird to see Florida at 26 and Mizzou ranked way ahead of them. Blake says he can't get over Dirkowitz pulling out the lightsaber on Mullen hours before Mullen got fired. Dirkowitz, by the way, he's a jerk. I mean, some of the stuff he does is just very jerkish. Very jerkish. By the way, we're looking at the 247 Sports composite team rankings. And Clemson fans, do you think you're falling behind? Or is this a sign of Clemson's got to regroup this year and they can move on? Currently, they're behind North Carolina. ACC teams in the mix up here. Let's look up here, make sure I didn't miss anyone. So North Carolina's 1, Clemson would be 2. And then it kind of goes downhill from there. And there's a drop off there after Clemson and North Carolina. Florida State's right there at 3, Virginia Tech's at 4, Miami's at 5. 803-978-1832. Quick break and we come back. A report on teams that could flash is the term during the 2022 season. We'll have that for you in just a moment. This is The Rundown. You're listening to Fox Sports Radio 1400. Let me get the rest of my printout. I'll be right back. Appreciate you guys checking in today. You guys are awesome over there. I said Drinkowitz. I said Drinkowitz, didn't I? If I said Dirkowitz, I'm sorry. I thought I said Drinkowitz there, Alan. I think Peyton was, they were going to fire Peyton. Welcome back to The Rundown, 803-978-1832. If you want to take a minute and join us here with what I said about recruiting for Clemson. and they're behind North Carolina now. Florida State is right on their heels. Is this just a blip, or is this the sign of hey, things are starting to slip? 803-978-1832. Elijah joins the program today. He says Florida's a must-win for Josh Heupel in year 2. I buy that because they're still down there trying to figure out what they're going to do at Florida. And I think that this may be the year. Hendon Hooker's there. I think there's still questions about the Tennessee defense until they can figure some things out. When you got the children of the corn from Purdue lighting you up like a Christmas tree, you should worry about your defense a little bit. But offensively, Tennessee should be fine. This should be the year that they should get them. In theory, Florida could beat their face in. We don't know. Another set for the bookcase of accountability. College football teams who could flash this upcoming season. Number 1 on the list is Coastal Carolina. Like, Coastal Carolina hasn't flashed. I mean, they were great in 2020. They didn't lose very many games in 2021. Their schedule this season: Army, Gardner-Webb, Buffalo, at Virginia, App State, Georgia Southern, South Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia State, Troy, Louisiana Monroe, and Texas State. They could be favored in just about every game they play. I don't know about Virginia. The Army game, I think they have a better chance of losing that Army game than the Virginia game, in my opinion. Army is a tough team every season. Some other teams on the list: BYU. They like BYU with their quarterback, Jaron Hall, and Tyler Algier. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It says they could make serious noise early with a home game against defending Big 12 champion Baylor and a trip to Oregon. Win those 2 games, and then we'll talk. Houston is another team that they seem to like here. A team projected to the New Year's Six next season thanks to a slew of key returning difference makers on both sides of the ball. Okay. Here's an interesting one. Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota is a team that you wonder, PJ Fleck is, man, he's a motivating guy. The whole row the boat thing, they love it. The article says that he has a little bit of everything, creates a successful finish, favorable schedule, multi-year starter returning at quarterback, and a defense that should be able to carry the team in spots. We'll have to put that on the wait and see end. NC State, ranked as high as number 8 in one preseason poll, but outside the top 20 in others. NC State and Dave Doran's team was interesting. They do lose their left tackle, Ikem Ekwonu. They lose their top 2 running backs, but they bring the most of that defense back. And Devin Leary threw 35 touchdowns this season. So, yeah, that's a team that could theoretically do something. I think they're going to be one of those ACC teams that's ranked in the top 25 at the beginning of the season, and they'll probably stay there. Kentucky. Man, Kentucky fans are so excited about this team. I mean, you can read the social media stuff about it, and they love Kentucky. They do have to replace Wan'Dale Robinson, but they do bring back their quarterback, Will Levis, and Chris Rodriguez, who seems like he's been there forever. Now, we mentioned the South Carolina Gamecocks. They're in the same thing as a team that could, quote, flash. Of course, the Gamecocks with their schedule, I think it's tough at the beginning of the season. Georgia State at Arkansas, also Georgia right there at the beginning. With Charlotte, SC State, they go to Kentucky, Texas A&M, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Florida, Tennessee, and Clemson. The Tennessee game is at home. They do have to play at Clemson as well. That's a tough out there. But they say South Carolina overachieved based on outside expectations during Shane Beamer's first season with 7 wins, including a Mayo Bowl triumph over border rival North Carolina Inconsistencies at the quarterback position all season should be solved in 2022 with former Oklahoma Signal caller Spencer Rattler headlining an expansive transfer class for the Gamecocks. Their Week 2 showdown at Arkansas, which is the SEC opener for both teams, is one of the league's most pivotal early season matchups and will determine where both of these programs stand in the early going. Look, if South Carolina can win that game against Arkansas, it's off to the races. I think that I'm not going to favor them to beat Georgia. They've got to go on the road to Arkansas, and Georgia comes to Williams-Brice. But it'll open the eyes of the Georgia faithful if South Carolina can go on the road and win at Arkansas. So there's that. So much time to look ahead, but this is for the bookcase of accountability. They also like the Southern Cal Trojans, as they think that Oklahoma quarterback Caleb Williams, man, think about how deep Oklahoma's quarterback room was. Think about it. I mean, they've had Caleb Williams. They had Spencer Rattler. What a quarterback room that was. They talk about how Southern Cal's roster has been completely overhauled, and they think they might be one of the preseason favorites in the Pac-12 alongside Utah. We'll see on that. This is one I don't believe is Miami, because we've been told Miami's back. The last two, they've been back forever. Yeah, Miami, every year. Miami was a top 10 team last year. How'd that work out? First-year coach Mario Cristobal does not have to reinvent the wheel at Miami. Yes, he does. They got rid of Coach Diaz so he could come in there and actually reinvent the wheel. Yes, that's what they hired you for. Please don't read this, Cristobal, and think that, oh, you can just be ops normal and just roll out your brand and things are going to work out well for you. This is not Oregon. They did say a team whose setbacks last season included 3 in the ACC by a field goal or less and losses to Alabama and Michigan State. The Hurricanes at 7-5 still moved on from Manny Diaz to grab a coach they feel can get them to the ACC championship. Yeah, good luck with that. Until Miami actually comes back, I'm tired of hearing people telling me they're back. Not buying it. The Texas Longhorns are the other. And I love the write-up on this. Beat defending SEC champion and preseason number 1 Alabama at home in week 2. And Texas goes from a fringe top 25 team to a team saddled with way too early playoff love. Dynamic offense with Quinn Ewers and Doak Walker hopeful Bijan Robinson. But the other side of the football is a major question for possible Big 12, the Big 12 title picture. So until Texas and Miami actually are back, I'm not going to talk about them being back. Really not. I hope to get to interview Coach Cristobal at ACC kickoff in July, and we'll ask him about that. If the expectations are, yeah, you should be at the ACC championship game this season. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832 is the number to call. If you want to join us here on the rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400, Blake says no Texas talk. That may be, we may have a moratorium on Texas stuff. No Texas talk until they're in the top 25 for 3 straight weeks after September 15th. I can do that on the show. Why not? Jimmy says Miami isn't playing any defense. Texas will get blown out by Alabama. Exactly. My buddy Carolina Jackpot, who is a noted singer, ladies and gentlemen, the guy can carry a tune, says he doesn't like Quinn Ewers. Okay. I can buy that too. More of the rundown when we come back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. I'll be right back. Yeah, if you don't like Jackpot singing, check out. Well, Peyton's retiring there, Jimmy. I mean, it's not, you know. McDonald's picture was outstanding. You shouldn't have got rid of that there, Alan. Oh, goodness. Well, welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeart Radio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us today, 803-978-1832. You know, we were talking about recruiting earlier and folks that put players in the NFL. Interesting article came out, and they actually went through and found the teams that had the most NFL draft picks since the year 2000. So we got like a 20-year window there. We'll give you the top 15 here just because I thought it was interesting. Number 15 is Tennessee since 2000. I started with Tennessee because Tennessee hasn't been a very good program lately, but they're still putting a ton of guys in the NFL. 84 players since 2000, including 15 first rounders. The Vols are getting the job done as far as getting folks into the NFL. At 14 is Penn State. They're also at 8. They're at 88 with 13 first rounders. Wisconsin is at 13th with 88 first rounders, 15 of them in the first round. 88 total picks, 15 first rounders. There we go. Number 12 is Clemson with 89, 16 first rounders. Of course, they mentioned Trevor Lawrence. Other Tigers drafted in the first round this century include Isaiah Simmons, Hunter Renfrow, Deshaun Watson, and DeAndre Hopkins. Number 11 is Notre Dame. When I look at Notre Dame, I think, okay, I always think Notre Dame for the offensive line. I really do. Notre Dame is at number 12. 12 overall. 12 first rounders, and they're at number 11. Number 10 is Michigan with 101. I didn't think that Michigan would be that high on the list. Oklahoma's at 9. Florida State is at 8. Florida State's put 113 players in the draft since 2000. Southern Cal is ahead of them with 117. They're at number 7. Followed by Miami with 123. Georgia checks in at number 5. Followed by Florida at 4. LSU at 3. Alabama's at 2. And number 1 goes to Ohio State. Ohio State with the most players drafted since 2000. 151 players. So the SEC has 3 of the top 10. ACC's got, I think, 2 in the top 10. And then the Big Ten showed up really well. Just thought that was interesting when you really stop and look at it as far as who puts teams in the who puts players in the NFL. But then I told you earlier, yeah, it doesn't really matter. Remember, Cooper Kupp is an all-pro wide receiver and played at Eastern Michigan. Talking out of both sides of my mouth today. It's pretty sad. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832. That is the number to dial if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeart Radio app. If you want to join us here on the program, of course, you can follow the show on Twitter. I'm at Rob Sounds Good. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. All right, so we talked about Clemson recruiting. We talked about the recruiting rankings where Clemson is number 3, second in the ACC. We'll check that out as we roll along. That may change. Clemson may have a couple more folks that may be coming that way. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832. That is the number to dial if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Of course, around the world on the iHeart Radio app. As we move in here, we've got Clemson basketball tonight. They play Duke. It's kind of a reschedule from a game earlier this season. They're at Duke tonight. Duke, the best team in the ACC. And I tell you what, they've been playing some pretty good basketball, but they've been getting popped lately. They really have. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Follow Up Beauty says, fire Brad Brownell. Yeah, I don't think Brad Brownell's going anywhere. And you know what? I don't know how to fix Clemson basketball. I really don't. Justin says Alabama should win tonight. You know, Alabama, of course. Who's Alabama playing tonight? I don't even know. Let me look at the schedule here. Top 25 games tonight. Alabama is on the road at Georgia. Yeah, I would think so. Is Georgia going to win a conference game this season? They may not. Auburn's also at Missouri. Mississippi State plays at Kentucky. Alabama's a 14-point favorite on the road. I think everybody sold all of their stock in for the football for Georgia, and I think basketball is kind of a. Blind Squirrel says, "Fire Tom Crean, hire Don Staley." I think Don Staley would have it right. Man, you watch her team, man, they are with it. I think she's a woman that could walk into a locker room and get those guys' attention quick. Anyway, there's your SEC games tonight. We'll look at the ACC games, and in just a moment, when we come back, a quick break. Final segment of the show is coming up. Of course, you can always follow the show on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good. Appreciate the back and forth that we have there. But I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Hall of Fame, not letting Barry Bonds in. We may get into that when we come back. This is Fox Sports Radio 1400. No, I'm not going to the sink. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeart Radio app. My name is Rob Sanders. Thanks for joining us today. Of course, you can follow the Twitter account at Rob Sounds Good. As we roll along today, of course, the big story, of course, today is what has happened with Sean Payton at the Saints. Apparently, he is moving on, and I think that he's under contract until 2024. So if someone scoops him back up, then everything will be fine. They'll have to pay New Orleans. So there's that. 803-978-1832. 803-978-1832 is the number to call if you want to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon on Fox Sports Radio 1400. Is Clemson slipping? We mentioned that on the recruiting trail. 803-978-1832. I wanted to talk a minute about the Hall of Fame. There are a couple of players that are on their last run here. And when you stop and look at it, one of them is Barry Bonds. So you can make an argument that Barry Bonds was one of the best hitters in baseball history. A guy that ended up leading the league in home runs. The thing that I get, the thing that gets me, though, with the whole Bonds thing is people are looking at it from a steroids perspective. I'm going to give you guys a secret. A lot of these folks used steroids in that era. Did it make him better late in his career? Yeah. But you know what? You can definitely make an argument that Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before all of that happened. You really could. I mean, he was above average in just about every category. Other folks that want to hold that against him. I mean, you think that certain pitchers weren't using the juice, basically? I find it hard to believe. I really do. 803-978-1832. Should Barry Bonds be in the Hall of Fame? Because I think this is the last year. Here are some other names that may be in the mix. David Ortiz. Of course, Curt Schilling. He came the closest last time at 71.1% of the vote. He needed 16 more to make election there. RR says Bobby Bonds was better. Will David Ortiz getting in there? That's one of the interesting things there. Will Bonds and Clemens make it? You know, I remember Roger Clemens being like, man, he was just outstanding. So, yeah, not so much when it comes to folks' perception of him with the whole baseball thing. Blonde Squirrel says Andrew Jones. Look, I think Andrew Jones was, you know, one of the greatest center fielders defensively ever. Yeah, no steroid controversy about Ortiz. We'll see. We'll see on that. I just, when I step back and think about it, even though I'm a Hank Aaron guy till the end of time, To have the Baseball Hall of Fame without Barry Bonds in it is kind of silly. To have it without Pete Rose in it is kind of silly. (803) 978-1832, 803-978-1832. That is the number to call if you want to join us here on the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. You think Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame? I could definitely get into the whole Pete Rose thing. I can also talk about the fact that when you look at a lot of these guys in the, quote, steroid era, they should probably be there. They really should. Holding their feet to the fire when a lot of guys used is kind of silly. Just be honest. Greg Maddux is in the Hall of Fame. I don't think there was any steroid controversy with Greg Maddux. He was, he didn't look like he was the guy that was jacked up. But there's been conversations that other guys actually used. I think a lot of it comes down to, in some cases, if you were friendly with the media, I think a lot of times some of that stuff would have went away. But the thought of Barry Bonds not being in the Hall of Fame is silly. 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832 is the number to call if you'd like to join us here on the Rundown this afternoon on Fox Sports Radio 1400. We're going to have playoff talk at the end of the week with our buddy Levon Kirkland, who has missed one playoff game as far as his picks go for the entire season. Jimmy's talking about Mark McGwire. That's a good one, too. Hold on. Let's go to the phones. Welcome into the Rundown. Good afternoon.
Hey, this is Ed. How you doing?
Hi, what's up?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
The Hall of Fame, this is not a character issue. I think that everyone that you mentioned should be there, but I don't think we should dress it up. I think if the record should be in the Hall of Fame. What was Barry Bonds famous for? What was Pete Rose famous for? They were famous. It's not a character. We're trying to clean it up sometimes and think, well, he's not worthy. Where he cheated, they cheated. They accomplished a lot. Their entire record should be there. Do you agree?
I agree, and the answer always comes back to this for me. Ty Cobb was a racist, crazy man, but he's still in the Hall of Fame. So, yeah.
And that should be in there.
That should be in there. Yep, exactly.
Okay, the other thing a couple things real quick. I think the Dallas needs a new head coach. I think they were sloppy.
Yeah.
I don't think they executed well. I think it's all right. They need to pull the plug on their coach and get someone who's going to run a tight ship. And I think the now ex-coach for Sean Payton should take that job. I understand he has a home in Dallas. And just one more thing, because I gotta run. I think Tom Brady, after his last incredible performance, I think he might give it up because there's a lot of guys that didn't do their part. That game should have went to overtime. So I wanted to share my thoughts with you, but as far as the Hall of Fame, absolutely, but don't make them look prettier than they are. If they're a racist, it should be racist. If they're whatever they were, but mention O.J. Simpson should be in the Hall of Fame. He is, isn't he?
I have to look. I think so.
Well, then the fact that what he was accused of should be there too. Why are we? I wonder why we try to clean up something. It's just news, Yeah. They're famous. What are they famous for? That should be there. Anyway, I enjoyed listening to your show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, he makes a valid point there that it should be down to what they did, and that's kind of the way that it should be. This is not the Hall of Fame and, hey, you're a good guy. Okay? I mean, I bring up Ty Cobb. By the way, one of my petty things that I like to do is on Twitter at Rob Sounds Good, I'll retweet O.J. Simpson, who gives us his fantasy football advice. And I always say things like, O.J. cuts right through cuts right through the chase or cuts right through this nonsense. OJ Simpson on Twitter is hilarious, by the way. All right, thanks for joining us on the program. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Lawton Swan of Clemson Sports Talk is next. He is the czar of Clemson Sports. Thanks for joining us on the show. We'll see you tomorrow. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you later.